Luthen Rael is already one of the most important figures in the rebellion.
I came looking for something more, and I think I found it.
But in Rogue One, he's nowhere to be seen. This guy constantly seems to be foreshadowing his own death, and his absence can only really mean one thing. He completed his mission, but at a terrible cost.
Oppression breeds rebellion.
We all know Luthen would sacrifice pretty much anyone or anything for the rebellion. But in the end, does that also include himself?
I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space.
Before we jump in, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on today's video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to catch more Star Wars and Andor Season 2 content, then you're in the right place. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the tragic fate of Luthen Rael and how it reshaped the Star Wars galaxy.
I burned my decency for someone else's future. I burned my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
Alright, now, Luthen Rael isn't just another name in a long list of rebels, he's the architect of the rebellion before it even has a name. Mon Mothma may be the face of the movement, but she's operating under a false belief that the Empire can be beaten through careful political maneuvering. Luthen knows better. He's already seen what the Senate can and can't do, and he understands that the only way to overthrow the Empire is through war. The problem is, war isn't clean, and neither is the rebellion in these early stages. Every decision he makes comes with a cost, and what sets him apart from others is he's prepared to pay it. That's why his absence in Rogue One isn't just a missing piece of the puzzle, it's a red flag. If someone this crucial to the movement disappears by the time the Death Star plans are being stolen, it really only means one thing.
You'll ultimately die fighting these bastards.
Anyway, moving on, Luthen is a character who speaks in absolutes, who doesn't second guess his choices. He reveals in Season 1 that he sacrificed everything, his soul, his peace, his humanity. He's not just fighting for the rebellion, he's ensuring it survives long enough to become a real threat. And that's what makes him dangerous, not just to the Empire, but to the very people he's trying to help. He built the network, recruited the right people, and orchestrated attacks like Aldani, and made sure every act of resistance served a bigger purpose. And unlike Mon Mothma, he doesn't care about keeping his hands clean. To him, the end justifies the means. Where others hesitate, he acts. He's the reason Cassian Andor ends up on the path we see in Rogue One, because Luthen doesn't just inspire rebels, he creates them. But that might also make him expendable to some. The early days of the rebellion require someone like him, someone willing to make the impossible choices. But once the movement gains traction, once it becomes something bigger than scattered cells and spontaneous acts, does a man like him still have a place in it? So yeah, this is the real question heading into Season 2. He spent years operating in the shadows, doing what needs to be done, but now the rebellion is evolving, and Luthen's methods are going to come under scrutiny. As new leaders emerge, ones that want to shape the movement into something more structured, Luthen's ways may seem less like a strategy and more like a liability. And that's where things get really interesting, because if Luthen sees the writing on the wall, if he knows his own time is running out, what does he do next? His sunrise speech in Season 1 wasn't just a monologue, it was a confession. He knows he's not making out of this alive. But the question isn't just how he'll die, it's whether he'll choose how he goes out, because if there's one thing we know about Luthen, it's that he doesn't leave things to chance.
What is that? I put slap charges on the doors.
And if he goes down, he's making sure it counts. But this is where things start to take a turn for the character, because we know Luthen's always been a bit of a mystery. While we know what he's willing to do and what he believes in, we don't know how he became this person, and in Andor Season 2, that's about to change. Tony Gilroy's already confirmed that we're going to be getting Luthen's backstory in Season 2, and that alone could shift our perception of him. Because right now, Luthen feels almost untouchable, like he's been hardened by decades of war, shaped into this cold and calculating mastermind. But what if he wasn't always like this? What if there was a time when he was just an ordinary man, someone who tried to live a normal life under Imperial rule, until something made him snap, something that goes on to set up the real tragedy of Luthen Rael? Like, what if this guy really has already lost it all? Let's say his wife and child were executed by the Empire, and the version of Luthen we see in Andor is just the shell of the man he used to be. Don't they say the most dangerous person is the one with nothing to lose or something like that? But yeah, a situation like that would explain why he's so emotionally detached and why he doesn't flinch at the idea of sacrificing innocent people.
You will suffer.
That's the plan.
Or maybe he was never a fighter to begin with. Maybe he was just another citizen trying to build a business, and he had to sit by and watch everything he'd built just be taken away from him. And that's when he made the decision, if the system can't be beaten from within, then it has to be burned to the ground. And that's where things start to take a turn. Because if we're finally going to see what made Luthen Rael this ruthless, it's not just about explaining his past, it's also about justifying his actions. If we understand what pushed him over the edge, then suddenly everything he's done, the manipulation, the betrayals...
What better way to reassure the ISB there's no leak in security than sacrificing Krieger?
The orchestrated chaos might start to make more sense. But here's the problem, Luthen isn't just fighting a war against the Empire, he's also fighting a war within the rebellion. And this brings us to one of the darkest possibilities of Andor Season 2, the Gorman Massacre. We know from Star Wars canon that the Empire eventually wipes out a peaceful protest on Gorman, an event that serves as the final push that forces Mon Mothma to go all in on the Rebel Alliance. But what if that massacre isn't just an unfortunate consequence of Imperial cruelty? What if it was planned? Luthen has already made it clear that he wants the Empire to overreact. He needs them to crack down harder, because in his mind, that's the only way to make people rise up. So what if he's the one that orchestrates the events of the Gorman Massacre? What if he's the one that sets it all up? And if that's the case, then this isn't just another example of Luthen playing the long game. This is him fully embracing the idea that sacrifice is necessary, no matter how brutal. It would mean he's not just provoking the Empire, he's actively pushing them towards atrocities.
We need the Empire to help. We need them angry. We need them coming down hard.
All in the name of accelerating the rebellion, and that's where his ideology starts to look dangerously close to the very thing he's fighting against. Because at this point, when do you stop becoming a revolutionary and start becoming something else? I think this is where Andor Season 2 is gonna force us to ask the biggest question of all: how far will Luthen go? Because if he's willing to orchestrate something like Gorman, if he truly believes that sacrificing innocent people is justified, then at what point does he become too extreme for even the rebellion to tolerate? And this is where things start to get really interesting, because if he is responsible for Gorman, the event that pushes Mon Mothma to publicly embrace the rebellion, then in a way it means the rebellion kind of owes everything to him, but then it also means they can't let him continue. Because if Luthen is walking this razor-thin line between savior and monster, then his fate might not be decided by the Empire at all. It might be decided by the very people he helped create. Now, speaking of walking a razor-thin line, Luthen seems to have spent a large chunk of his life walking a tightrope between rebellion and outright terrorism. But as we've seen, he's not just building a movement.
The network's been built. It's up.
He's actively making choices that will shape the galaxy long after he's gone, and that brings us to the real question. Does Luthen survive his own war, or does the very cause he helped build become the thing that ultimately destroys him? Everything we've seen so far suggests that Luthen's fate will be a direct consequence of his own actions. He's the guy who's spent years orchestrating chaos, pushing the Empire to overreach and ensuring that every attack leads to a bigger response. And he's done it with one belief: that oppression breeds rebellion. That the problem with that mindset is that it has no brakes. Once you start down that path, there's no stopping it. And if Luthen truly believes that people must suffer in order to rise up, then at some point, that same logic has to apply to him as well. Now, here's a thought-provoking idea. What happens when the rebellion grows beyond him? Right now, he's the only one making the tough calls, deciding who lives and who dies in the name of the greater good. But what if, in the eyes of new rebel leadership, he's seen as a liability, like Mon Mothma's already shown that she's not totally comfortable working with him? We know she's much more restrained in how she wants the rebellion to operate, but as that movement gets bigger, as more people join the fight, at what point does Luthen stop being an asset and start being a threat to their long-term success? And that leads us right into one of the biggest possibilities of Season 2. What if it isn't the Empire that takes Luthen out after all? What if it's actually the rebellion? Maybe he pulls one final move that crosses the line, forcing someone within the movement to take him out. Like, just imagine if it turns out to be Cassian.
Kill me. Or take me in.
Or maybe one of his own attacks backfires. He sets something in motion that he can't escape from, and instead of running, he simply accepts his fate, knowing that his death will serve the cause just as much as his life did. Ultimately, it all comes down to that core belief of his that sacrifice is necessary. He said it himself.
I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
And that's exactly what we see with Cassian in Rogue One. By the time we meet him there, he's already fully embraced that same ideology. Luthen doesn't just shape the war, he shapes the people who fight it. He instills in Cassian the idea that victory doesn't come without loss, that being a rebel means being willing to do things that no one else will. And the more I think of it, like, yeah, imagine if it's Cassian that finishes him off, pulling from the same teachings that Luthen bestowed upon him. But yeah, that's why his story is so tragic, because his entire purpose is to create something that he knows he'll never get to be a part of. But what if his death isn't just an unfortunate consequence of war? Perhaps for the rebellion to survive, then maybe, just maybe, Luthen can't. Anyways, at this point, the fate of Luthen Rael isn't just a tragic inevitability, it's a necessary moment in the formation of the Rebel Alliance. He spent years in the shadows making hard choices, organising chaos and forcing the Empire's hand. But rebellions are messy, and history has shown us that the people who start them often don't make it to the end. Like Mon Mothma represents the vision of the rebellion that will go on to one day become the New Republic. But she can't stand beside someone like Luthen forever.
This is something else entirely.
Turning back will be impossible.
His existence alone contradicts the ideals she wants the rebellion to embody. She believes in diplomacy and unity and presenting the rebellion as something noble. But Luthen, he believes in winning. He knows that wars aren't won by playing fair, and he's already made peace with that. So how does he bow out of the equation? Well, there's a few ways he could go. Maybe he's taken out by the Empire in a last stand, the moment that cements him as a martyr for the cause. Maybe he's betrayed, not by an enemy, but by his own people. Saw Gerrera.
Let's call it war.
Another faction of the rebellion, or even Cassian himself forced to make an impossible decision. Or maybe, and this feels like the most fitting, he engineers his own death. Because Luthen isn't the kind of man who gets caught off guard, he's always a few steps ahead of everyone else. And if he sees his time is running out, if he knows that his death could serve the rebellion in a greater way than his survival ever could, then maybe he chooses to go out on his own terms. And that's what makes his story so powerful. Because without Luthen, there is no rebellion. But at the same time, without his death, the rebellion can't survive. He's a necessary part of the war, but not to the future. Perhaps his story in Season 2 will evolve to never be about victory, but rather about paving the way for others to claim it. So how do you think Luthen's story will play out? Will he ride off into the sunset, or will he give it all for the rebellion? As always, drop your thoughts, theories, and wildest speculations down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our video covering the potential return of Grand Moff Tarkin in Season 2. And of course, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.